Welcome to Delightfully Dysfunctional, a podcast about navigating the emotions of the human condition and the challenges that come with it. I'm Kaylani Persian Mason, a psychotherapist and life coach with James Timmons, an ever-curious human. This is not a replacement for mental health therapy. Please seek out mental health care if that's what you're needing. This is an opportunity for self-healers to dive deep and understand more about themselves. Welcome back to Delightfully Dysfunctional. I'm Kaylani, and today I have a very special guest on the podcast. Today I will be interviewing Alex.l.abraham. He is the author of a powerful memoir, Trauma and Ecstasy. It is a raw and deeply honest book. Alex takes us through his journey of healing from childhood trauma, chronic pain, and emotional disconnection, guided in part by the transformative power of psychedelic-assisted therapy. His story isn't just about pain. It's about what happens when we confront that pain with courage, support, and curiosity. Through moments of chaos, clarity, and even unexpected joy, Alex shows us that healing is possible and that on the other side of trauma, there can be connection, meaning, and yes, even ecstasy. Thank you so much for joining us, Alex. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kalani, and that wonderful introduction. And I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, wonderful. I love, and again, like reflecting after having read the book, what I really find and what I described there in the introduction of you is how powerful it is to shine a light of hope for people who very often feel like this is just how I am. I have to accept it. Healing isn't possible for me. They feel like they're the exception somehow. And although this isn't necessarily one of the questions that I had shared with you, I just have a question right off the bat that intuitively is coming to me. Like, what message do you want to give those people? Because I feel as though you are a different person than what you have described previous to your healing journey.
Yeah, I think the message I would give to people working through childhood sexual abuse or other forms of trauma is that I do think a real change is possible when using psychedelic medicine in the right context, in the right environment, with the right people in place. And I do think they can really drive fundamental change in a way that maybe talk therapy or sort of some of the other therapeutic modalities maybe cannot. So I think these tools are powerful enough that there's motivation, and if there's sort of the right setting, they can really drive home, real lifelong change.
Wonderful. Oh, so exciting. So tell us a little bit more, like Trauma and Ecstasy. It begins telling the story when you are in adulthood and you are traveling overseas. I similarly, like running away from some of my trauma, traveled overseas, but to South Africa. So I related to that. I'm like, yeah, what is like the farthest way I can get away from home? Yeah, that's where I'll go.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I spent several years basically in my college running to different places, including South Africa. And it was a really great time, but I can also see I was very disconnected at that time. So I think travel sort of saved me, but it also kind of drove home how my inability to kind of form lifelong or deep relationships with people, because I think travel is so transient and you always are running into new people, but you don't really form intimate connections. And I was just incapable of doing that at that time.
It can mask that issue and not let it be kind of like seen in the full light of day because of the nature of that travel and everything you're saying. Right. So it was like this really exciting adventure, but also in hindsight, you can look back and be like, oh, I might have been like fooling myself by signing up for all of that. Like, again, like these transient relationships.
Yeah, I think it's what I needed at that time.
Right.
But now that I'm sort of more focused on healing, I've been more focused on trying to build deeper and sort of more positive connections with people, in one place instead of traveling all across the world.
Wonderful. And at this point in your journey of self-discovery and healing, like kind of going back to this, like traveling back to this point where you're traveling and you're young, if you'd been asked just candidly about your childhood, how do you think you would have responded? This would have been before like these realizations you'd come to.
Yeah, I thought my childhood when I was 23, 24 was pretty typical. I had parents that I knew I didn't get along with great, but I thought generally were fine. And I thought I had a childhood that generally went okay. It was pretty all American. And I even grew up, relatively well off. So in that sense, I thought it might even been better than average. And it never really occurred to me that I had a lot of trauma or that a lot of deeply traumatic things had happened to me.
Yeah, yeah. And so often I think that sometimes we think about class or like one's financial security, and there are so many homes that have like that are financially secure that have that, and there still is trauma that's happening. So I think that your story really highlights that truth as well.
Yeah, I think trauma is race blind, is ethnicity blind, all that's gender blind. I think all this stuff can happen to anyone regardless of sort of who they are. And I think another thing is that a lot of what we I think in today's society, a lot of what we interpret as not traumatic actually can be very deeply traumatic, in the sense that, I think the US is very achievement oriented and sort of very disconnected from ourselves and the way we kind of
Yeah.
work and the way our communities are shaped right now. And I think a lot of aspects of Western living are actually, if you really think about it from an evolutionary level, deeply traumatizing. And so my hope is that in the next, 5 to 10 years and even longer, there could be like a fundamental shift, even in the Western society as a whole, and we can sort of get back to maybe a more connected way of life.
Yeah, man, I'm over here like a little bobblehead for anyone who's just listening and hasn't tuned into our YouTube channel. But I'm just like nodding my head because anything when we're bringing it back again to like the evolution of how we thrive as humans, it comes back to connection. And you're so right. Everything you're hitting the nail on it. I think we're all very much like living in a toxic climate that is not conducive to really thriving as a human. And yeah, and so this story is kind of peeling back those layers of realization that you had, not just about your own healing, but it sounds like also the climate that you were raised in and viewed as normal.
Absolutely. Yeah, I grew up in a very sort of competitive area. I think a very achievement oriented place. And while I certainly don't think that was the main aspect of my trauma, I definitely think
Mm.
uh, I definitely think that played a role in sort of how I view the world and how competitive I am, and sort of how everything had a winner and a loser. And
Yeah.
I think that's a very tough way to live. A
I
very tough
guess
way to see
striving
the
for
world.
one's worth through achievement or winning in comparison to others. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it will, I'm sure, like weave into your story as well, but an aspect of it I also relate to, and I think makes it this mindset difficult to break from is we may have both had some like very driven workaholic mothers. I don't know if that really like deep, like fiercely loving, but like distracted.
Absolutely. Yeah. My mom was, I think, pretty dissociated, particularly when I was very young. Because, I realized I'm 31. She was 31 when she
Mm.
had me. And I still don't feel ready. I think in part because of the trauma I've been working through, ready to be a parent. But she was a parent at my age. And I think she was very driven and very focused. And I think in some ways that was good because it really helped our family provide financially. But at the same time, I look at she wasn't really there when I was growing up. I think there was definitely some attachment issues even before kind of the trauma that I worked through, and I definitely think it was some emotional disconnection throughout my childhood, and that sort of is something I'm still working through now.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like this has also opened up an opportunity for healing for her, this process,
Absolutely,
which is the
yeah.
goal, right? That our healing gets to illuminate that for others.
Yeah, she's gone through her own healing journey, and I'm really grateful for that and really admire her for that. But yeah, I definitely think there was some fundamental issues growing up, and I look at how I want to raise my kids. I think I would like to do it differently than a little bit how I was raised. So
Yeah.
I think hopefully every generation can sort of grow from the one before it and kind of evolve and kind of go to a higher level. And that's certainly my intention for my family
Yeah.
whenever that happens.
Yeah. Healing that generational trauma. So as you're writing this book, what was it like to start putting your words and your experience down on the page? And was there new insights or closure that were discovered along the way in that process?
Yeah, I think we've touched on this a little bit, but I will just be blunt. I was serially sexually abused by a teacher when I was very young, and that's sort of the crux of this book in terms of using psychedelic therapy to heal from that abuse. Because I was all the physical manifestations. I was having really bad pelvic floor problems that started when I was 23 after a bike ride, and then they kind of continued for several years until I started doing psychedelic therapy and realized I'd been abused. But in terms of writing the book, so what happened is I was really struggling personally. I actually wrote a letter naming my abuser to my school district because he was still at an elementary school, and unfortunately, I was basically dismissed. And he remains in elementary school today. And so, particularly after that aspect, I was really struggling personally. I was very upset about that. I was trying to think of what to do next, to kind of help me work through this. And my
Mm,
shaman, the woman I do psychedelics with, suggested I write a book, both in the sense that it could help me, in the sense that it could potentially help other abuse survivors, and could potentially, give kind of a written record to my experiences. And so that's what I decided to do. And it was very difficult. It really took a lot of, I was suffering physically while writing the book. I got sick a bunch of times. I was not sleeping very well. I was tired all the time. I was stressed. I didn't realize how obsessed and sort of enmeshed in the book I was until
mm.
after it sort of ended. But it was one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life. But my hope is by sort of being as honest and vulnerable as I could, and kind of shining a light on childhood sexual abuse and both how debilitating it can be for survivors and how awful it is, but also how psychedelic medicine can help heal in a way that I think is fundamentally different kind of healing than it would be with talk therapy. That my hope is all these things together could help others and kind of move anyone who reads it in a slightly more evolved and connected direction.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And also, like, not mentioned, but just being a male survivor of childhood sexual abuse, I think that there are not enough voices speaking or talking about that. And it immediately can give anyone who's been harboring a sense of shame or disconnection this, like just not knowing you're not the only one. That's just so huge. Like getting to,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful gift.
Thank you so much. I felt that, there are very few books about male survivors, and I felt like my book could add to that canon. And then I also felt like there are very few books about using psychedelics to heal trauma in a memoir perspective. There's been some like research done by journalists or scientists, but I think first person, firsthand accounts, I think we're sort of missing from the literature. And my hope is that my book could add to the canon there as well. And I also felt, there are many women who have been abused as well. And while there are a lot of books regarding female sexual abuse, I didn't see very many books about them using psychedelics to heal either. So my hope is it could be kind of both genders can be
Benefited.
helped by
Yeah.
benefited from this book.
Yeah, most definitely, most definitely. I spoke to a friend of mine who is a pelvic floor therapist, and I was telling them about your book, and we nerded out for a while. It was so fun about like a how common it is that in their experience with sexual abuse having pelvic floor issues for individuals and like not remembering and how connected our body is to our experiences. And then, yeah, that discussion about, oh, whoa, yeah, if it were this comprehensive system of working with a pelvic floor therapist and a mental health counselor and someone who's like doing the psychedelic work, a guide, and just this collaborative approach and what could be possible. So it was an exciting moment to just think about, yeah, wow, there's such a rewiring of our neurons and our nervous system that needs to happen. And these medicines are there to help facilitate that.
Yeah, I was actually talking to an MD at dinner last night, a conventional doctor, and I asked him, like, do you guys learn about trauma in med school? And he's like, not really. And
No.
so I think that's very disappointing and typical, and was really typical of my experience with Western doctors. But my hope is in the next, 5 to 10 years, there's going to be more education from MDs about both nutrition and kind of trauma, because I think they're both really fundamental to a sort of optimized health and optimized body. And so my hope is that the Western and kind of Eastern modalities can sort of merge together a little bit more. And
Mm,
maybe even AI will help with that as well. Because I actually asked AI, what are the causes of male pelvic floor dysfunction? And it had sexual abuse as one of the first ones. So I don't know. The doctors really did not ever ask me about that. They talked a lot about
that's so
stress and
interesting.
even anxiety, but there was never any talk about childhood trauma. But the AI caught that pretty quickly. So my hope is that with the combination of kind of more awareness of trauma and then
Right.
better tools, even Chat GPT, that together they can sort of kind of help evolve Western medicine.
Sure. Yeah. To have those sometimes challenging conversations for people and normalize it. Yeah. It understands the brain body connection, even without a body. AI
Sure.
does. You've described a little bit, but just to color in more of who you are, like prior to this journey versus now, what are some differences that you can really clearly notice in the way that you interact with others or approach life?
Yeah, I was a pretty angry guy for a long time. I think I've sort of moved past a lot of that anger. It still comes up from time to time. And one thing I wanted to really shed color on is I don't think any of my problems have totally gone away since psychedelic medicine. I think every single one of them has improved, in many cases dramatically. But, this is not a magic pill. And I didn't wake up one day and like, wow, life is amazing now.
Right.
Maybe that will still happen, because I'm still in my healing journey. But I think, it's really important to be realistic and grounded about what they can and can't do. I think there'll always be some pain from my abuse, emotional pain anyway, about what
Yeah.
happened and how debilitating it was and how badly it impacted my life. But I think I've been able to kind of put it in its place through psychedelic medicine and kind of maybe rewire my neurons a little bit and sort of take the emotional charge off it. But in terms of, other ways I'm different, I think I really struggled with vulnerability before I started doing psychedelics and being
Boy, and this
connected
is
with,
such a vulnerable book too. What a way to
yeah,
like
thank you.
incorporate that into your healing. Yeah.
Yeah, and connecting with people on an emotional and deep level. I think I really, I had a lot of fear that was sort of holding me back and kind of, I guess it's sort of tied to vulnerability as well, but I just didn't approach people very much. I just kind of shied away from sort of even being around people and was pretty reclusive. So I think all that has sort of, I feel like I've almost come out of a shell or I come out of an egg since psychedelic medicine over time. And I think those are some of the ways I fundamentally changed and grown. I think I just have a lot more perspective too. I still get caught up in day-to-day problems. Like, I'm looking for a job right now and I'm stressed
Right.
about it. But at the same time, it doesn't have quite the like I'm still going to wake up tomorrow either way. I'm still going to be okay in the long term either way. And there's sort of a more of a expansive view of life, and that this is a moment in my life and not the moment in my life. Whereas before,
Right.
I had a tendency to sort of catastrophize and sort of when things were going badly, like this is the worst day ever, and like my life is never going to be good, and just
Right.
sort of go into almost a victim mindset and almost a catastrophe mindset. And so I've gotten better about that for sure.
Yeah, it's not so all consuming and you have some tools to navigate it. Yeah. And I love, again, your honesty around these aren't magic pills. These are still things that are going to come up. As for any human, when we're stressed, we regress. It's not like you reach this like optimum moment of like, there we go, I'm fully healed. Life is going to be beautiful from now on. Like, I don't think that that's what life school is all about. Life school, like this experience that we've signed up for, is meant to give us lessons to navigate, and yeah, like being able to tune into that is what I'm really hearing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe some people get to the point where life is fundamentally different after a psychedelic
Mm.
session, but that has not been my experience so far anyway. And I think it's
Yeah.
been a very gradual process, almost like a climbing of a ladder. And
Hmm.
I suspect it will continue to be that way for as long as I'm on this earth.
Yeah. And that brings me right into the next question that I have. Like trauma and ecstasy, these are two very intense words that you titled your book. And in a lot of your psychedelic sessions, I would actually describe them as like quite intense. This isn't necessarily like you mentioned, like, yeah, I have euphoria and that is lingering or I'm able to hang on to that. It was an intense healing session. But I'm wanting to know, what does ecstasy represent for you in the context of healing? And did
Sure.
you experience those moments of joy, awe, spiritual connection balanced with some of these painful moments in your healing?
When I think of ecstasy, I think at the very beginning, well, the first time I ever did MDMA therapeutically, which is almost about 4 years ago now, exactly, is I felt a sense of love and peace for myself and sort of a sense of
Mm-hmm.
calmness. And I realized how anxious and how angry and sort of how hard I was on myself when I was not on MDMA. And that feeling of calmness and peace felt like a sense of ecstasy because I felt kind of in touch with who I was at my core, and I felt a sense of love for myself and empathy that I really never felt before. Certainly couldn't ever recall feeling, and so that sense of safety and calmness really was ecstatic in that moment. And I think as I've kind of evolved and done more psychedelics, I'm still sort of looking for. There are still moments where I don't feel spiritual on psychedelics and where I feel kind of disconnected from that. But as I go deeper and deeper into my journey, I feel more a sense of connection and spiritual belonging with kind of all things and sort of part of a bigger system. And so I think as I continue to evolve on my healing journey, this sense of oneness and sense of belonging and sense of kind of spiritual awakening maybe is just going to continue and expand as I sort of move through my trauma.
Yeah, wonderful. Again, like just highlighting like it's a process and there's patience. There's not a cure-all for healing. I think again, these are like tools to help, but not a solve for everything. In some of the darker moments, you mentioned pretty intense panic attacks, really, difficult depressions or moments of suicidal ideation. And in these first moments of entering into this healing journey and these dark times, what was the motivation? What was the thought process that helped you stay motivated and continuing to heal when it felt so very overwhelming?
Yeah, I didn't feel like I had a choice, to be honest. I didn't want to, off myself, and it seemed to like take a break from healing or take a break from psychedelics didn't seem that productive, or I just felt like it would sort of hold me back. And so I feel like if you're going through hell, right, you just want to keep going and keep pushing forward. And that's what I tried to do with my shaman and my other therapeutic members of my team is just sort of to push through and kind of feel all the feelings around my abuse, try to let as many of them go as possible, try to sort of rewire my thinking as much as I could, try to journal, try to get enough sleep, try to exercise, and just try to function best I could during a very difficult time. But it was very 2022, 2023 were very difficult years for me, as was really the several years before that with kind of all the pelvic problems I was suffering from.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a long journey, and I'm still sort of enmeshed in certain parts of it. But I also think the worst is probably behind me, and so I'm really grateful to be here now, and grateful to be excited for the future.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I mean, being able to just like talk about it and have expressed everything is night and day from the version of you that you describe, prior to realizing, oh, I'm going to have to like I can't avoid like going through this jungle, going through this like forest of navigating my healing. Like I'm going to have to just go through it, and that determination, I think, has really shown.
Thank you so much. I'm super grateful to hear that, and my hope is that I can help shine a light for other survivors that are looking to that are looking to heal but don't quite know how, or don't quite know all the steps, or don't quite have the roadmap that, and my book can serve as that roadmap.
Yeah, so very true. And I think in the midst of like navigating one's trauma, this is a difficult thing to hear, but I find it to be true, especially when you get to the other end or you feel more steady in that navigation. But, oftentimes our hardship can reveal these beautiful hidden gems and strengths within us. And so in your case of overcoming your trauma, I'm wondering what unexpected strength or sense of purpose or emotional depth, what were these gems for you, these qualities that you gained or you realized about yourself through the process of healing and writing this book?
I think some of the gems I've gained is I tend to pick up on signals pretty well from other people. Like I tend to be a pretty good observer of people. I don't want to say that, I never get someone wrong, because obviously that's not true, but I do think I have a good sense, and friends have told me that I have good judgment around that. And I think I sort of have to, because as a kid, obviously I was in a bad situation with a bad individuals, and, that almost got me killed, unfortunately.
Mm.
And so I think the brain doesn't quite forget that, and there's a sense of vigilance around people that I think can be sort of hard, because it makes me a little hard to trust others. But I
Mm.
also think can sort of assess people quickly and correctly in a way that people that didn't have the trauma that I had might not come quite as fast. So I think that's definitely a gift I've gotten over the years, and something I appreciate now. And in terms of other hidden gems, I think there's a sense of resiliency and a sense of confidence that I'm going to get through
Mm.
this, because I've gone through so many difficult things already. A lot of things I'm going through now don't seem quite as tough as they might have had I not had all this trauma. And I think there's a sense of pushing forward, and a sense of grit, and a sense of, going through adversity is a part of life that I might not have had had this not all happened. And so, especially, growing up with money, I think that could be tough for people to have that sense of adversity if everything's going well. But I had a bunch of other things not go well, obviously, and so I think that's really served me in terms of the school of hard knocks, so to speak. And I think given me a sense of grit that I might not have otherwise had.
Yeah, yeah, very true. And another piece of that navigation too was like there was anger and resentment towards certain members of your family and like that feeling like how could this have happened? And I think anyone who's experienced really any kind of childhood trauma to some degree, it kind of can go back to the parents and of this feeling of like, why didn't you protect me? Right. There's that inner child part of us that is still feeling so tender and hurt. And I'm curious about that, like confronting those feelings and being able to understand them and finding forgiveness. Like, how has that process been? Especially so with the family members that you described in your book.
Yeah, I think there was a ton of anger to begin with. I really did feel like they let me down. They left me in some pretty vulnerable situations with an adult that they really shouldn't have. And I think there will always be scars there for sure that this happened. But at the same time, there's sort of, at the end of the day, it's up to me to sort of move forward from this. It's sort of my responsibility. It's not my fault, but it is my responsibility to sort of heal from this the best I can. And to sort of hold on to that anger to them is sort of counterproductive and not healthy, and really not that relevant at the end of the day. Particularly because it wasn't really intentional. I mean, it wasn't intentional. They were hoodwinked by this individual, just the way a lot of school officials have been hoodwinked by him. And I think, they just didn't see it, and they didn't think about it. So, will there always be scars there? Like, yes, for sure. Especially with my dad in certain ways. But I think, I've moved through a lot of that, and I'm really focused on trying to build relationships with them moving forward, and sort of, where can we go from here, versus kind of focusing so much on the past, or what did or what didn't happen. That's not to say there aren't moments where I feel that, and feel that sort of
Right.
victim mindset, and feel that anger, and feel like they did let me down, because I do think they did let me down in a lot of fundamental ways, and psychedelic medicine has not changed that feeling.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's about moving forward.
Yeah, right. And I think Um, yeah, I've actually thought a lot about your mom, partially because like I'm a mother, and so as I'm reading it, some of the really difficult times, it was like gutting for me thinking about you as a little boy in those situations, and um, I I think that not knowing everything, right? I know like a grain of sand, but she was the one who reached out to me and started the communication between us. And that knowing that and then having read the story too, I'm like, oh, she's trying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my mom has really helped me through this and been my
Yeah.
number one supporter, and I'm super grateful to her for that, both emotionally and frankly financially at times. And so, yeah, I really appreciate it, and I think that support has made it easier for me to let go of anger toward her.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so if for those who have read the book, this is going to be a question that everyone is wanting to know, but if not, please read it so then you know why we're asking. Not just the emotional pain and feeling disconnected, but also the ways that this trauma showed up in your body, making like sexual intimacy difficult, challenging, and not knowing, I'm sure, how to like talk through it. And as it was something you were discovering on your own. So this was really impacting your dating life, your romantic life at the time of writing this book. As you've worked through more of that and continued to heal, have you noticed changes in how you approach intimacy or trust in a partner and dating?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still working through some physical issues now. They haven't fully resolved. And I wouldn't say I'm actively dating, but I am actively being social and actively going out a lot, actually. And I think dating will sort of come last, but, I'm talking to a lot of people for sure. So, I think I'm working with an intimacy coach still to sort of get more comfortable in that realm and that domain. But, I'm still not quite like I don't have a girlfriend or anything.
Yeah.
And I think I hope that will come in the next year or so or whatever, however
Yeah.
many years. But I'm getting there, and so I think it's like anything else, part of healing. It's a journey, and
Mhm.
I look at where I was a year or two ago when I was really not going out. I really was not getting myself out there. Kind of socially, and that's totally
Mhm.
changed. And I think I've done more social stuff in the last 6 months than I had in like the previous 3, 4 years I was in Austin. So I think it's been really
Yeah.
gratifying, and I think it's another big step in my healing journey.
Totally. Being able to be open just vulnerably around other people and share in connection with them. Yeah, I think that that's wonderful. And yeah, there's no rush. There's no rush. But
Yeah.
um I honestly I'd even say from having like, I've listened to hours of your speaking voice because I did it on Audible and was listening to it. And then I watched a couple of previous interviews that you've done, and I'm not exactly sure of like the time frame of when they were recorded, but I see a difference in like your speech, your how relaxed I feel that you are in this conversation. And to me, that's really pointing to all of the work that you've been doing. Like I sense a difference.
Thank you so much. I'm super grateful. I've also done a lot of podcasts
Yeah.
since the beginning, so I think I've gotten more comfortable in this
Oh,
format as
sure.
well. But I
Right.
definitely think the combination of the medicine and healing work I've done, in addition to the podcast experience, has given me more of a comfort in this domain.
Yeah. So we were speaking about like the support that you've received from family, but you were also mentioning friends, and we're talking about building that support system. Um, how did having a reliable circle of like guides and therapists, loved ones, or fellow survivors, if that's the case, how did that help your journey and compared to trying to heal in isolation?
Yeah, I think healing is done in groups or community or even one on one, and it's very difficult to heal by yourself. I'm very skeptical of anyone
Yeah.
that can do that. Maybe they can, but I certainly couldn't. And I think I really relied on a men's group, the male survivors who had been sexually abused in the Austin area. And the biggest people I relied on was my mom and kind of a triage of therapists, particularly a shaman I worked with here in Austin that was heavily featured in my book, and she and my mom were sort of my number one and two supporters, and I'm super grateful for them. And I really think they were the ones that got me through this more than anybody else. And I do think it's tough because when you're dealing with something fundamental like childhood sexual abuse, most people are not equipped to sort of work through that and handle it. And I think trying to turn your friends into your therapist, or trying to turn your even my mom into my therapist, wouldn't have worked out very well. And I do think when you're dealing with like big T trauma, like some really fundamental stuff like that, it can be really good to get professional help. People who've trained to do this, people who've been doing it for a while, people who've experienced working with people that have gone through what you've gone through. And, I just don't think, especially as a 30-year-old male, that many 30-year-old males are sort of equipped to sort of to help someone do the deep healing work. And I don't say that as a judgment of them at all. I'm
No.
not even sure I'd be equipped to do that with someone else right now. But
Yeah.
I think it's really good to get professional help for deep trauma. That would be my takeaway from that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm all for people getting help. That's the line of work that I'm in. And I think if I'm putting myself in that position too, there's a high risk of feeling like rejected or more isolated if you're bringing those things up with people who they just don't have the tools. It's not that they don't care, right? Like they just don't
Exactly.
have those tools. We're all wired differently. Like don't ask me to fix a tech problem, but I can talk
Yeah.
about the deep stuff for like hours on end, and it's fascinating and something that I'm capable of doing. We all have our strengths.
Exactly. It'd be like trying to ask me to, be a HVAC super, I just don't have
Yeah.
the capability. But I also think, what was I going to say here? Friends, I think they can be really good as a grounding source and a kind of a grounding tool. And, when you're talking about, stuff like childhood sexual abuse for hours on end with a therapist, sometimes the last thing you want to talk about with friends is the abuse anyway. And so I think my friends are really helpful in that regard. We have a group chat that, I am a part of, and I think that was a good, relief from sort of the in-person therapeutic work I
I
was
can
doing.
just, yeah, where I can just be Alex. I don't have to like look at that part all the time.
Exactly. So that would be my takeaway as well, that people can serve different purposes in someone's healing journey.
Right. And what started, as you were starting to consider psychedelics, I'm just wondering what drew you to this option? And did you ever have any nervous skepticism around substances like MDMA?
Yeah. So I think what drew me is kind of the first person accounts of people that I had heard of before. Someone like Tim Ferriss had really talked about how he used MDMA and psilocybin to heal from his own childhood sexual abuse. And I had been familiar with him before he ever went public with that and was a fan of his. And I think I could even see the change in him from 2010 to 2020. So seeing that up close, even if we didn't have a personal relationship, was really eye-opening to me. And I think also I was just pretty desperate. Even if I didn't know at the time, I actually didn't think I was going to do psychedelics to heal the physical issues. I thought I was just going because I was anxious. But I look back and like I tried everything else. Like I tried talk therapy, I tried getting a Botox injection, I tried meditating, I tried sauna, I tried swimming, I
You really
tried
did. You
yeah,
tried everything.
I tried pelvic floor physical therapy. I tried acupuncture, and just nothing was working. And I just don't think there were any other tools available
Yeah.
to humans that could have kind of seeing how much trauma I was carrying and seeing how much I was struggling and seeing how difficult the last 4 years have been. The idea that I could have healed without psychedelics, I just think was impossible. So I needed the strongest tools available, and I do believe that psychedelic medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Um, Having experienced these altered states and integrating those psychedelic experiences, I think that you have come away also with this understanding of how important those integration sessions are and what that looks like. So I want to see from your words, like tell us more about how integration helped. And integration, for anyone who doesn't know, is a session with a psychedelic guide or therapist who's trained to be able to help you make sense of your experience and how to gain tools and insights to help you in your healing. But how pivotal and important were those integration sessions for you?
Yeah, I think integration is fundamental to healing using psychedelics because the medicines themselves just sort of open the door for change, and they can sort of do the initial stages of change, but the real change comes when the critical period is sort of reopened and sort of your brain is reshaping over the months and weeks after a session. And
Mhm.
so I think by doing energy breath work with a shaman every week, doing talk therapy, doing EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, going to my men's group, journaling, working with intimacy coach, working with a body worker, getting enough exercise, trying to sleep as much as I can, trying to eat relatively well. All that together kind of consists of an integration practice.
Mhm.
And so all those things kind of in conjunction and kind of combined, I think can really drive fundamental change in the days, weeks, and months after a session and kind of take
Right.
over new behaviors. Like there were certain things I was doing. Certain behaviors, like I was spending way too much time on dating apps, even just sort of like I wasn't even going on dates. I was just
Right.
bored and then after one session I was like, this is like a waste of time. So I got rid of them all. And so I think it was almost like a switch flipped. And so I think stuff like that can be really, like I was spending too much time on social media too. And I kind of cut down
Right.
a lot on that. And so I think you can kind of see these behaviors for what they are during a session, and then the days, weeks, and months after, you can sort of make those fundamental changes that can sort of impact your life in a positive way.
Yeah, really breaking up kind of the flow of oftentimes numbing behavior that we can fall into and breaking up that default mode of being. Um, and I'm really hearing you say that like you mentioned it, psychedelics open this door, but it's your choice whether you walk through them. And part of the walking through is taking on and doing the work of changing those things and having deeper insights and like really processing, why am I doing the things that I'm doing, and maybe questioning it or taking a different route.
Yeah, how does that serve you? Where did that come from? Is it still serving you? I think these all can be good questions to ask if there's a behavior that either you don't understand or came up on psychedelics as something that was not healthy. And
Right.
then you can kind of in the weeks and months after kind of lean into that and kind of evaluate these behaviors in a deeper way.
What I really notice with the clients that I work with and the psychedelic work that I do is oftentimes if they're coming in, maybe a bit like ways you've described yourself, but where if I ask those questions, like, why are you doing that? The answer would maybe be just, I don't know. And there's just like, it's like a flatness. Um, and psychedelics give you this, like, you get to peel off this other layer. So then maybe weeks after doing some work, I ask that question and they might be able to say, well, it felt scary. So I did it, like they have a more depth and understanding of themselves. They've gotten to meet themselves and have become more friendly with who they really are.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's part of doing the trauma disconnects, I think, from others and from
Yeah.
yourself. And I feel like I didn't know who I was, and I didn't really know what I liked and what I disliked and who I really, because I think we are kind of energetic beings,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of, I think we do all have souls. And I think, you can really, on psychedelics, really get in touch with how you feel about yourself and sort of how you feel about, the world on a deep and fundamental level during
Yeah.
these sessions. And I think I was very disconnected, and I'm still a little disconnected, but I've gotten much more in touch with my likes, my dislikes, my personality, my behaviors, and what it is I like about myself and why. And all that has really shifted since I started doing medicine.
Wonderful. And, there's really therapeutic means of doing medicine. There are not so therapeutic means. And, speaking to the facilitation that you sought out and finding the right support, the power of really making sure that you have the right fit person that you're working with and trying to minimize any potential risk that might be there if medicines are used unwisely. I just want to know more of your thoughts in ensuring that you were in good hands during your journeys and finding qualified people to work with you. And was there also experiences of maybe not finding the right qualified people and it being a lesson?
Yeah. So early on in my healing journey, I worked with someone who did not have very much experience and was not super qualified. And I had a lot of trauma come up, like I dissociated. And it was a really bad time for both of us, in my view. I think it sucked and it was just not, she wasn't ready. And I think she was scared and I got scared. And ever since then, I've taken who's guiding me in these sessions very seriously.
Mhm.
Because I think even if they don't say anything or do that much, I think it's very important to have someone there, particularly early on, and sort of get feel that sense of safety and trust. And so even so for me, I really look for someone who has a lot of wisdom and has been around the block a couple times and has deep experience because of the deep trauma that I went through. For other people, maybe they feel more comfortable with someone like closer to their age or someone that they feel. But I think the sense of connection and sense of trust is most important. And I find that from older people who have, done this for a while. But I think it's different for everyone, and it's sort of like finding any other therapist. What matters is the therapeutic relationship, the therapeutic connection. Do you guys mesh versus where they went to school, or how much experience they have, or what kind of I don't know what kind of modality they really work with. I think all the things are not as important as the therapeutic alliance, and I feel the same way about psychedelic medicine.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. Yeah, very good. And so finding that really quality person that you click with, I always recommend any prospective clients, I'm like, shop around. Like you're interviewing me. And if this feels like the right fit for you, then we can move forward. But I think putting that power and that insight in the hands of the person who's doing the healing is really important. And that goes really against that Western model of medicine of like, I'm the expert, so I'm going to tell you what to do. And this is like the cookie cutter approach. Each person is unique, and finding the right healer is a unique journey too.
Sure, absolutely.
So your personal journey is part of this larger conversation about trauma and how we heal. How do you see the future of trauma therapy evolving in light of this psychedelic renaissance and continued research? What is your hope for how you can see society changing and transforming when it comes to healing trauma and mental health?
Yeah, my hope is psychedelics are a big part of the trauma healing future, and I think they will be over time, particularly in the therapeutic setting, particularly MDMA assisted psychotherapy and psilocybin therapy. And I think with the right guides, and obviously not everyone wants to do this or is willing to do this. I think even most people probably are not willing to kind of take those drastic steps. But I do think there are people that want to and either don't know about it or don't have the financial means or don't feel comfortable doing something that's currently illegal. And so my hope is that as the psychedelic renaissance continues to grow, more and more people will take the plunge if they want to and sort of do that deep healing work, and that we as a society can sort of reorient if more and more people do it and sort of get more connected as a communities and as even a country like the U.S. So that would be my hope. My hope is that my book can play the smallest of parts in bringing about that change and bringing in furthering that renaissance. Particularly because as I mentioned before, I don't think there are as many personal narratives about healing as there have been research studies
Right.
and sort of journalism. And I think that has a place, and that was definitely needed like 10 years ago to legitimize the space, to legitimize that these tools work and that they're needed and that they can contribute. But at this point, I think it's pretty well established that these tools have a lot of potential, and that in the right hands, in the right environment, in the right setting, they can really do a lot of good. And now it's about telling stories, because I think ultimately people learn through story. They want to take the jump to start their own journeys, usually through story and not through like a research study. And so my hope is that there will be more and more personal narratives around psychedelic therapy and around how integration and around how these things helped people drive change in their lives in the kind of the years and even decades to come. And that these stories will kind of drive legal change, drive policy change, and drive cultural change.
Yeah, definitely increasing the curiosity and the compassion for this work and those that feel that psychedelics are the right choice for them. So I've totally agree. It's through story. I mean, then that's just again like going back to like the evolutionary unfolding of humans, it was stories that were passed down. These were like bits of knowledge and wisdom that were so important that we still thrive on, stories that existed thousands of years ago. And so it's through stories still that we can gain such beautiful insight and depth that a study or a journal article cannot reach. It's the personal story, it's the heart of what's being told.
Absolutely.
So my next question for you shared a few things, but and surely like we can't predict the future, but I'm wondering, in 5 years, where do you see yourself? You said are you 31?
Yeah, I am 31.
Okay, so at 36, like what are the things that you are striving for or you hope to see in your life when you're 36, Alex?
Yeah, I really want to do something entrepreneurial for work. I think something in the for-profit sector, but around healing and kind of health, and maybe something like Dr. Bronner's soap that I know they played a big part in psychedelics, or
Mhm.
some other sort of healing like for-profit business. And then at the same time, I want to do something around psychedelics, kind of on a part-time basis, whether that's coaching or kind of helping raise money to help pay for people's sessions in a nonprofit capacity. And those would be kind of the two big things I have. And I don't think I ever want psychedelics to be the number one thing in my life, but I do want to play a role on a part-time basis indefinitely, because I think these tools really matter. And I think the stories we tell about our lives really matters, and the healing that we do. And I think, healing obviously isn't everything, but I do think without healing, and if you are really stuck in trauma, it's really hard to do much of anything. It's hard to have good relationships. It's hard to take care of yourself. It's hard to be successful in the conventional Western model. It's hard to have fun. It's hard to laugh. And
Yeah.
so I think for people really struggling with depression or PTSD or, major anxiety disorder, I do think these tools can really shock in how much they can change people in a relatively, in months and years versus not decades. And so my hope is that, I want to play a role in helping more people access and kind of discover these tools and decide for themselves if it's right for them.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm cheering you on, and I hope that the right ears hear this podcast and it can inspire them to take the leap in their healing journey. Or maybe this was like the best job interview and they're just going to be like rushing to call you up, Alex. That's my hope too.
Yeah, that it's always unclear, because I think for the book, I was sort of uncertain about how it was all going to unfold. And one thing I'm discovering is, I think there's still some hesitancy around psychedelics in corporate America and around books in general. But I think I'm still proud I wrote it, and it sort of reaffirms my decision in some ways to have written it, to kind of drive about change and perspectives and sort of help open people's eyes, or at least people who have read it, what psychedelics are like, that they're not like stuff that makes people go crazy, and that they can really be healing tools, not I don't know, whatever people thought they were doing in the 60s that were
Yeah.
nuts, jumping
Uh,
off walls or whatever.
right. Like here's your brain on drugs and it's a fried
Yeah,
egg in a pan. Right. Yeah.
exactly.
That's not what's going on. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and being vulnerable in everything that you've gone through and your healing journey. I think that you are shining a real beacon of hope and it's creating ripples for people. And trusting in that path is so important in a world that often doesn't. So, again, I am cheering you on, and I just hope that everyone takes the opportunity to go find Alex's book, Trauma and Ecstasy. You can find it on Amazon. You have a website. Can you share your website?
Yeah, traumaandecstasy.com. And then I'm alex.l.abraham on Instagram, and alex@traumaandecstasy.com on email.
All right.
So yeah, I'm pretty easy to reach, and I really appreciate or happy to answer any questions about the book, or provide any help that I can.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I'm sure that we will be in touch. Please, everyone, find Alex's information and check him out. Trauma and Ecstasy. I highly recommend this read. And thank you so much, delightful listeners, delightful humans, for joining us for this episode. We will see you in the next one. And please remember to be curious and compassionate in your day. That's a huge lesson that I think that your story really shares and highlights as well, Alex.
Thank you, Kalani. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. Bye bye.